famous Gothic novel, Dracula. In Chapter 6 of Stoker's Dracula, Mina describes in her journal her visit with Lucy Westenra to Whitby, and particularly to the haunted, ruined abbey high up on the cliff top. What follows is a whispered version of that chapter, accompanied by my footage of this wonderfully atmospheric town. July, Whitby. Lucy met me at the station, looking sweeter and lovelier than ever, and we drove up to the house at the Crescent, in which they have rooms. This is a lovely place. The little river, the Esk, runs through a deep valley, which broadens out as it comes near the harbour. A great viaduct runs across with high piers, through which the view seems somehow further away than it really is. The valley is beautifully green, and it is so steep that when you are on the high land on either side, you look right across it, unless you are near enough to see down. The houses of the old town, the side away from us, are all red-roofed and seem piled up one over the other anyhow, like the pictures we see of Nuremberg. Right over the town is the ruin of Whitby Abbey, which was sacked by the Danes, and which is the scene of part of Marmion, where the girl was built up in the wall. It is a most noble ruin, of immense size, and full of beautiful and romantic bits. There is a legend that a white lady is seen in one of the windows. Between it and the town there is another church, the parish one, round which is a big graveyard, all full of tombstones. This is to my mind the nicest spot in Whitby, for it lies right over the town and has a full view of the harbour and all up the bay to where the headland called Kettleness stretches out into the sea. It descends so steeply over the harbour that part of the bank has fallen away and some of the graves have been destroyed. In one place, part of the stonework of the graves stretches out over the sandy pathway far below. There are walks with seats beside them through the churchyard, and people go and sit there all day long, looking at the beautiful view and enjoying the breeze. I shall come and sit here often myself and work. Indeed, I am writing now with my book on my knee and listening to the talk of 3 old men who are sitting beside me. They seem to do nothing all day but sit here and talk. The harbour lies below me with, on the far side, one long granite wall stretching out into the sea, with a curve outwards at the end of it, in the middle of which is a lighthouse. A heavy sea wall runs along outside of it. On the near side, the sea wall makes an elbow, crooked inversely, and its end too has a lighthouse. Between the 2 piers there is a narrow opening into the harbour, which then suddenly widens. It is nice at high water, but when the tide is out, it shoals away to nothing, and there is merely the stream of the Esk running between banks of sand with rocks here and there. Outside the harbour, on this side, there rises for about half a mile a great reef, the sharp of which runs straight out from behind the south lighthouse. At the end of it is a buoy with a bell, which swings in was a sailor in the Greenland fishing fleet when Waterloo was fought. He is, I am afraid, a very sceptical person, for when I asked him about the bells at sea and the White Lady at the Abbey, he said, very brusquely, "I wouldn't fash mussel about them, miss. Them things be all wore out. Mind, I don't say that they never was, but I do say that they wasn't in my time. They be all very well for comers and trippers and the like, but not for a nice young lady like you. Them feet folks from York and Leeds that be always eating cured herrings and drinking tea and looking out to buy cheap jet would creed aught. I wonder Massel who'll be bothered telling lies to them, even the newspapers, which is full of fool talk. I thought he would be a good person to learn interesting things from, so I asked him if he would mind telling me something about the whale fishing in the old days. He was just settling himself to begin when the clock struck 6, whereupon he laboured to get up and said, "I must gang again awards home now, miss. My granddaughter doesn't like to be kept waiting when the tea is ready, for it takes me time to cramble aboon the grease, for there be a many of 'em, and miss, I lack belly timber surly by the clock." He hobbled away, and I could see him hurrying, as well as he could, down the steps. The steps are a great feature on the place. They lead from the town to the church. There are hundreds of them. I do not know how many, and they wind up in a delicate curve. The slope is so gentle that a horse could easily walk up and down them. I think they must originally have had something to do with the Abbey. I shall go home too. Lucy went out, visiting with her mother, and as they were only duty calls, I did not go. 1st of August. I came up here an hour ago with Lucy, and we had a most interesting talk with my old friend, and the 2 others who always come and join him. He is evidently the Sir Oracle of them, and I should think must have been in his time a most dictatorial person. He will not admit anything, and down faces everybody. If he can't out-argue them, he bullies them, and then takes their silence for agreement with his views. Lucy was looking sweetly pretty in her white lawn frock. She has got a beautiful colour since she has been here. I noticed that the old men did not lose any time in coming and sitting near her when we sat down. She is so sweet with old people. I think they all fall in love with her on the spot. Even my old man succumbed and did not contradict her, but gave me double share instead. I got him on the subject of the legends, and he went off at once into a sort of sermon. I must try to remember it and put it down. It be all fool talk, lock, stock and barrel. That's what it be, and nowt else. These bands and waffs and bow ghosts and bar guests and boggles and all anent them is only fit to set barns and dizzy women a belder in. They be now put plebs. They and all grims and signs and warnings be all invented by parsons and Ilsenberg bodies and railway touters to scare and scunner halflins and to get folks to do something that they don't other incline to. It makes me ireful to think of them. Why, it's them that, not content with printing lies on paper and preaching them out of pulpits, does want to be cutting them on the tombstones. Look here, all around you, in what urge you will. All them steens, holding up their heads as well as they can out of their pride, is a cant, simply tumbling down with the weight of the lies wrote on them. Here lies the body, sacred to the memory, wrote on all of them, and yet, in nigh half of them, there bean't no bodies at all, and the memories of them bean't cared a pinch of snuff about, much less sacred. dogs, all duped together and trying to drag their tombstones with them to prove how good they were. Some of them trimmeling and dithering, with their hands that dozent and slippery from lying in the sea that they can't even keep their gerb up them. I could see from the old fellow's self-satisfied air and the way in which he looked around for the approval of his cronies that he was showing off, so I put in a word to keep him going. "Oh, Mr. Swales, you can't be serious. Surely these tombstones are not all wrong." "Yablins. There may be a poorish few not wrong, saving where they make out the people too good, but there be folk that do think a barn bowl be like the sea, if only it be their own. The whole thing be only lies. Now look you here. You come here a stranger, and you see this king calf." I nodded, for I thought it better to assent, though I did not quite understand his dialect. I knew it had something to do with the church. He went on, "And you consait that all these steens be a boon folk that be happed here snod and snog." I assented again. "Then that be just where the lie comes in. Why, there be scores of these lay beds that be tomb as old duns back a box on Friday night." He nudged one of his companions, and they all laughed. "And my gog, how could they be otherwise? Look at that one, the aftest about the beer bank. Read it." I went over and read: "Edward Spensler, Master Mariner, murdered by pirates off the coast of Andres, April 1854, aged 30. When I came back, Mr. Swales went on. Who brought him home, I wonder, to have him here? Murdered off the coast of Andres, and you consated his body lay under. Why, I could name ye a dozen whose bones lie in the Greenland seas above." He pointed northwards, "or where the currents may have drifted them. There be the steens around you. You can, with your young eyes, read the small print of the lies from here. This Braithwaite Lowry, I knew his father, lost in the Lively off Greenland in 20, or Andrew Woodhouse, drowned in the same seas in 1777, or John Paxton, drowned off Cape Furwell a year later, or old John Rawlings, whose grandfather sailed with me, drowned in the Gulf of Finland in 50. Do you think that all these men will have to make a rush to Whitby when the trumpet sounds? I have me antherums about it. I tell ye that when they got here, they'd be jumbling and jostling one another that way that it'd be like a fight upon the ice in the old days, when we'd be at one another from daylight to dark, and trying to tie up our cuts by the aurora borealis." This was evidently local pleasantry, for the old man cackled over it, and his cronies joined in with gusto. "But," I said, "surely you are not quite correct, for you start on the assumption that all the poor people, or their spirits, will have to take their tombstones with them on the day of judgment. Do you think that will be really necessary?" "Well, what else be thy tombstones for? Answer me that, miss." "To please their relatives, I suppose." "To please their relatives, you suppose?" This he said with intense scorn. "How will it pleasure their relatives to know that lies is wrote over them, and that everybody in the place knows that they be lies?" He pointed to a stone at our feet, which had been laid down as a slab, on which the seat was rested, close to the edge of the cliff. "Read the lies on that rough stone," he said. The letters were upside down to me from where I sat, but Lucy was more opposite to them, so she leant over and read: "Sacred to the memory of George Cannon, who died in the hope of a glorious resurrection on July 29th, 1873, falling from the rocks at Kettleness. This tomb was his sorrowing mother to her dearly beloved son. He was the only son of his mother, and she was a widow. Really, Mr. Swales, I don't see anything very funny in that. She spoke her comment very gravely and somewhat severely. You don't see aught funny? Ha! But that's because you don't go on the sorrowing mother was a hell-cat that hated him because he was a crooked, a regular lamiter he was, and he hated her so that he committed suicide in order that she mightn't get an insurance she put on his life. He blew nigh the top of his head off with an old musket that they had for scaring crows with. 'Twarn't for crows then, for it brought the clegs and the doups to him. That's the way he fell off the rocks. And as to hopes of a glorious resurrection, I've often heard him say, Mazel, that he hoped he'd go to hell, for his mother was so pious that she'd be sure to go to heaven, and he didn't want to addle where she was. Now isn't that Steen at any rate? He hammered it with his stick as he spoke. A bag of lies. And won't it make Gabriel keckle with Geordie? Comes panting up the grease with the top steam balanced on his hump, and asks to be took as evidence. I did not know what to say, but Lucy turned the conversation as she said, rising up, "Oh, why did you tell us this? It is my favourite seat, and I cannot leave it, and now I find I must go on sitting over the grave of a suicide. That won't harm you, my pretty, and it may make poor Geordie gladsome to have so trim a lass sitting on his lap. That won't hurt ye. Why, I've sat here off and on for nigh 20 years past, and it hasn't done me no harm. Don't you fash about them as lies unto ye, or that doesn't lie there either. It'll be time for ye to be getting scarred when you see the tombstones all run away with, and the place as bare as a stubble field. There's the clock, and I must gang. My service to you, ladies," and off he hobbled. Lucy and I sat a while, and it was all so beautiful before us that we took hands as we sat, and she told me all over again about Arthur and their coming marriage. That made me just a little heartsick, for I haven't heard from Jonathan for a whole month. The same day I came up here alone, for I am very sad. There was no letter for me. I hope there cannot be anything the matter with Jonathan. The clock has just struck 9. I see the lights scattered all over the town, sometimes in rows where the streets are, and sometimes singly. They run right up the Esk and die away in the curve of the valley. To my left, the view is cut off by a black line of roof of the old house next to the abbey. The sheep and lambs are bleating in the fields away behind me, and there is a clatter of donkeys' hoofs up the paved road below. The band on the pier is playing a harsh waltz in good time, and further along the quay there is a Salvation Army meeting in a back street. Neither of the bands hears the other, but up here I hear and see them both. I wonder where Jonathan is, and if he is thinking of me. I wish he were here. Mina Murray's Journal, 26th of July. I am anxious, and it soothes me to express myself here. It is like whispering to oneself and listening at the same time, and there is also something about the shorthand symbols that makes it different from writing. I am unhappy about Lucy and about Jonathan. I had not heard from Jonathan for some time, and was very concerned. But yesterday, dear Mr. Hawkins, who is always so kind, sent me a letter from him. I had written asking him if he had heard, and he said the enclosed had just been received. It is only a line dated from Castle Dracula, and says that he is just starting for home. That is not like Jonathan. I do not understand it, and it makes me uneasy. Mrs. Westenra has got an idea that sleepwalkers always go out on roofs of houses and along the edges of cliffs and then get suddenly wakened and fall over with a despairing cry that echoes all over the place. Poor dear, she is naturally anxious about Lucy, and she tells me that her husband, Lucy's father, had the same habit, that he would get up in the night and dress himself and go out if he were not stopped. Lucy is to be married in the autumn, and she is already planning out her dresses and how her house is to be arranged. I sympathise with her, for I do the same. Only Jonathan and I will start in life in a very simple way, and shall have to try to make both ends meet. Mr. Homewood, he is the Honourable Arthur Homewood, only son of Lord Godalming, is coming up here very shortly, as soon as he can leave town, for his father is not very well, and I think dear Lucy is counting the moments till he comes. She wants to take him up in the seat on the churchyard cliff and show him the beauty of Whitby. I dare say it is the waiting which disturbs her. She will be all right when he arrives. 27th of July. No news from Jonathan. I am getting quite uneasy about him, though why I should I do not know, but I do wish that he would write, if it were only a single line. Lucy walks more than ever, and each night I am awakened by her moving about the room. Fortunately, the weather is so hot that she cannot get cold, but still the anxiety and the perpetually being awakened is beginning to tell on me, and I am getting nervous and wakeful myself. Thank God Lucy's health keeps up. Mr. Homewood has been suddenly called to ring to see his father, who has been taken seriously ill. Lucy frets at the postponement of seeing him, but it does not touch her locks. She is a trifle stouter, and her cheeks are a lovely rose pink. She has lost the anemic look which she had. I pray it will all last. 3rd of August. Another week gone by, and no news from Jonathan, not even to Mr. Hawkins, for whom I have heard. Oh, I do hope he is not ill. He surely would have written. I look at that last letter of his, but somehow it does not satisfy me. It does not read like him, and yet it is his writing. There is no mistake of that. Lucy has not walked much in her sleep the last week, but there is an odd concentration about her which I do not understand. Even in her sleep she seems to be watching me. She tries the door, and finding it locked, goes about the room, searching for the key. 6th of August. Another 3 days, and no news. This suspense is getting dreadful. If I only knew where to write to, or where to go to, I should feel easier. But no one has heard a word of Jonathan since that last letter. I must only pray to God for patience. Lucy is more excitable than ever, but is otherwise well. Last night was very threatening, and the fishermen say that we are in for a storm. I must try to watch it and learn the weather signs. Today is a grey day, and the sun, as I write, is hidden in thick clouds high over Kettleness. Everything is grey except the green grass, which seems like emerald amongst it. Grey, earthy rock, grey clouds, tinged with a sunburst at the far edge, hang over the grey sea, into which the sand points stretch like grey figures. The sea is tumbling in over the shallows, and the sandy flats with a roar muffled in the sea mists drifting inland. The horizon is lost in a grey mist, all vastness. The clouds are piled up like giant rocks, and there is a brool over the sea that sounds like some passage of doom. Dark figures are on the beach here and there, sometimes half shrouded in the mist, asked him to speak fully. So he said, leaving his hand in mine, "I'm afraid, my dearie, that I must have shocked you by all the wicked things I've been saying about the dead and such like for weeks past, but I didn't mean them, and I want you to remember that when I'm gone, we old folks that be daffled and with one foot above the crock hull don't altogether like to think of it, and we don't want to feel scarred of it, and that's why I've took to making light of it, so that I'd cheer up my own heart a bit. But Lord love you, miss, I ain't afraid of dying, not a bit, only I don't want to die if I can help it. My time must be nigh at hand now, for I be old, and 100 years is too much for any man to expect, and I'm so nigh it that the old man is already whetting his scythe. You see, I can't get out of the habit of gaffing about it all at once. The chaffs will wag as they be used to. Some day soon the angel